experience will maybe pick up a few tips to make your raised bed gardens more productive as well as easier to take care of. I was going to take everybody out in our raised beds. We have some back here in our demonstration garden. But given that we got a lot of rain last night and it's muddy and probably going to hit 100 degrees today, it's not a great combination for an outdoor field trip. So, but if anybody wants to go out there afterward, I'll be glad to meet you out there and show you what we have. And I'll talk a little bit about them while we're here. So first of all, for those of you who have never done it and would like to, what is a raised bed? Well, it's basically just raising up the soil level above what we call the native soil, the ground. And it needs to be at least 6 inches higher. And sometimes we enclose it by a frame, and the plants are usually spaced closer. So in a raised bed, you get more produce out of it, or flowers, or whatever you're growing, because you are growing it closer together. It's kind of a combination of raised beds, intensive gardening, where that is a method for planting your plants closer together. Square foot gardening is another term that we use, and another, sometimes you hear it called lasagna gardening, but lasagna gardening refers to how you fill it with your soil, not so much just that it's a raised bed. Hi folks, welcome in. So this is some photos. I thought we'd start off with how it looks. It's your garden, it's your house or your yard. You make it like you want to. There's no right or wrong. In this case, there's a nice chicken in the front. Let's see if this pointing. Can't see it real good. But they've done it with corrugated metal, and it even has a little shade on top if you want it to give it some sun protection. Corrugated metal is a good way of framing things in. It does get hotter, because of that heat if it's in the full sun. This one is just some old lumber that this gardener had, and they even sectioned it off so that they could keep their crops kind of under control. Up there you have cinder blocks in the middle, and I like that one. We have a cinder block garden out back as well, and we find it to be very productive. It's a good border to use if you use a border. Easy to maintain, it doesn't rot, it costs a little more up front, but it's been very clean to keep that garden under control. And they have put PVC pipes in there as supports, permanent supports for their vertical plants growing up. And the tallest one in the back, you can see there's some line grids drawn through that for their beans to run up. So you only have to do that once. That's the nice thing about it. It's in there, it's once, it's done. Do you have to do that? No. It's just how you're doing things. Up in the corner over there, it's old logs. I tried that with a raised bed that I did, and I found that the logs deteriorated pretty fast. But the soil they left behind was so enriched, it was worth doing. I had them, I used them, they're still in use because, hey Colin, I'm sorry, I forgot to call you this morning. This is my helper. You want to come up here? First thing I'd like you to do, this is my grandson, is see if everybody has one of those handouts, okay? Thank you. He's earning community service points, not because he got in trouble, but he has to do it for something. So the logs are a really good way if you have it and have some to use. Don't get rid of them. Let them go back into your garden. We also have a hay bale garden out back, and we found that works well, but not the best, because the hay, of course, deteriorates so quickly, and you have to replace it probably every year, not every other year, if not every year. However, that's another organic component that goes right back into your soil and enriches your soil. Some people will plant into the hay bales, just kind of a sidebar. You hear a term called hay bale gardening. This is not in your notes, but hay bale gardening. But to make that successful, you have to prepare the hay bales. You can't just put them out there and put your plants in. You have to condition the hay bales over a period of several weeks. You start early spring before the planting season, water them, get them good and wet, sprinkle them with fertilizer a few times, and you'll start a decomposition process down in the middle of that hay bale, which creates a nutritious environment for your plants to live in. Then you can plant in them. If you're doing that in a raised bed, you're only going to do it for 1 year. Just know that you're only going to have that structure for 1 year because the plants are going to eat up the nutrition in those hay bales. The other good thing about a hay bale garden is if you rent or are not going to live where you're at for very long, it's gone when you're done with it. You don't have to remove any structure. Just level it off and you're done. And then again, the final type of raised bed garden in this slide has no border at all. So you don't even have to do that. The borders keep it neater, define your space, make me feel better as a gardener, but they're totally not required. And I think I have another picture later on in the slide. But these are some more traditional wooden structures that have been purchased or made, homemade. They're really easy. You want them to be at least 6 inches high. But they've taken, again, PVC pipe and made a hoop over it. And I've even seen people bury hula hoops that way. And that way you can put a cover over it. If you're planting something like cabbage crops and you want to keep cabbage flies off of it, you can protect it with a row cover. You can do it early spring with plastic and create a mini greenhouse. Or if you've got problems with rabbits and deers, a little chicken wire will keep them out. So a lot of control with a raised bed. And then for some of us with disabilities that just can't get down on our knees as much anymore, you can build a very high raised bed. Grow anything you want in that, and that could even be a border, a decorative element in your home. You can make them wheelchair accessible with raised beds. And this is one I'd love to try and haven't yet. It's called a keyhole garden. It's another form of raised bed. This is done with landscape pavers, but again, corrugated metal, stones. You would have to have some kind of container structure to hold that in because you're building it up about that high. But the neat feature, why it's called a keyhole garden, you can walk in here and you can't see it real well, but that's a hole in the middle of the garden straight down. It's lined with chicken wire, rabbit wire or something. And you put your compost in that, your raw compost. So you're composting directly into your garden. And when you water into that metal area or it rains, it leaches the compost out to the surrounding soil and feeds it. This is used extensively in third world countries where they can get a great deal of produce out of a very small area and minimal water usage. So it's becoming quite popular here. Those are all raised beds. Any questions so far? Any comments?
That looks like it's about 3 layers.
Yeah, that's about 3 layers high. You'd want it to be at least that, 3 feet to get a good soil amount in there. And, 4 or 5 feet across, whatever size you want. Like I said, it's your garden, so depends on your materials. If you're ever out at Ellington Ag Center in Nashville, our Central Region office is located there for Extension, they have one in their gardens. And I think they built it with cinder block that they reclaimed from a construction site. So, what are the benefits of having a raised bed? Why do we even do it? Well, you have better soil drainage because you're building it up and the water can run off. That's a plus and a minus. We'll talk about that later. And you don't get soil compaction. Generally, we build our raised beds no more than 3 or 4 feet wide, as long as you want, but no more than 3 or 4 feet wide, so you can reach it from either side, and you never have to step in it. So you don't get soil compaction, which is one of the main problems in the garden. The soil will warm up faster in the spring because it's getting solar energy on all 4 sides and the top instead of just the top in a regular ground garden. What do we do? No, that's not good. There we go. I got it. So it warms and dries faster in the spring. That's a plus and a minus too. It warms and dries faster all summer long too, so you do have to water more. If you have a garden area with very little soil or poor soil and you just can't move it enough in the ground, you can control the soil in your raised bed much better. I lived in Las Casas for a period of years and on a rocky glade. I didn't have any soil. So raised bed gardening was the only thing I could do, and it was very successful. It fits neatly into small spaces. You don't have to have 6 rows, in your backyard or give up a lot of space because you can plant more intensely in a raised bed, so it takes less space. And it increased accessibility. It's very much easier on your back. And raised bed gardening does not require a shovel. No digging. Yay. The drawbacks. Well, you may have to bring in soil. You may have to backfill that raised bed. Because it is higher, the soil dries out faster, and you do have to watch your water. If you're going to frame it in, you are going to have an initial cost on the building materials. It's going to take a little time of your time to do that. But how much time you spend weeding in a garden? This way you can trade out time a little bit. No shovels, no tiller, no anything except some hand tools are required for a raised bed garden. But you do have to weed. Even though it's a controlled environment, weed seeds are going to fly in, they're going to blow in, the birds are going to drop them. So you will get weeds. And you have limited crop rotation. If you want to, if you plant tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, eggplant, they're all a member of the nightshade family. If you plant any of those crops in the same place year after year after year, you're eventually going to have some disease and insect problems that are specific to that family of plants. So what farmers do is they try to rotate to different areas. But when you have a 4 by 8 foot garden, that's kind of hard to do. But there are some ways around it, but it's limited. Raised bed gardening makes sense if you want to get gardening early. If you want to use improved soil in a limited area, you don't want to backfill a 20 by 40 garden plot. It's a lot cheaper and easier to backfill an 8 by 4 garden or a couple of those. If you have wet conditions where you live, because of the improved drainage, raised beds make sense. If you have physical limitations gardening at ground level, it's just hard to get up and down. You got a bad back or something, the raised bed, even just that 6 to 12 inches off the ground makes a huge difference. And if you live in an area that you have a lot of runoff or erosion problems because of the better drainage in a raised bed, it will help improve that. Anything? It's okay. I don't mind questions. Just speak up and shout out. It's fine. I just don't want to go over too fast. So, why? Reduces wasted space, concentrates your work effort. You have a better plant environment, less weeds, although some, and it's great for limited garden space. So when you're choosing a location for your raised bed, well, just like any garden, it depends on what you're going to grow. If you're going to grow shady plants, you can do flowers in this, herbs, vegetables. Most commonly, we see vegetables. And anything that produces a fruit or a vegetable needs 6 to 8 hours of sun a day. So you can put it where you need to put it. A lot of our flowers and some herbs and green plants, if you're growing those, can do more shade. So you could put one in the shade. You want to choose a location that's close to your water supply, because if your hose doesn't reach it, you're going to get real tired of carrying buckets out there. And you want to make it convenient to where you want it. You can put it right outside your back door. So how do you decide, framing or not framing? Well, some of the materials you can use, as we talked about, stones, concrete blocks, recycled plastic boards, untreated or treated wood. Well, a lot of people are scared of treated wood around food, but since 2003, does not contain arsenic anymore. So you can use treated wood. There's a very low risk. Can I say there's none? No. But if you have treated wood and you want to use it, you can always use a plastic liner so that the soil doesn't touch the wood. You're not in any great danger, but if you just want to be extra safe, you can do that. And there's an example of a raised bed garden with no framing around the beds. They grow grass in between, or maybe a cover crop that you can walk on. But instead of buying fertilizer and digging up that whole area, they're only buying fertilizer and caring for the raised beds. So you've reduced your cost of maintaining that garden. And up there, it's a little more elaborate. They put netting around, just netting, like you would use for birds, attached to posts at each corner of the garden and keep rabbits and other critters out. So you've built your garden. You've decided if it's stone, not stone, wood, whatever you're going to use. Now you have to fill it in. All dirt is not soil. The first thing Extension teaches us as we go through Master Gardeners is if you're gardening in it, it's not dirt. Dirt's what's under our beds. What's in our garden is soil. And all soil is not created equal. You can see, I hope you can see in the pictures up there, the lumpy soil looks like our clay soil in Rutherford County. It's hard, it's compact, it's hard for tiny feeder roots to get through it. So you want to have improved soil if you're going to do intensive gardening. You want to make the most of it. So you need something that's more crumbly, looser, falls apart. You know, if you squeeze it in your hand, it falls apart again. A lot of people think, well, I'll just go to wherever and buy bags of topsoil. Well, that's a good start, but it's not all you want. Topsoil is basically a landscaping fill, even if you buy it in the bags at the big box stores. It's usually a mixture of sand and organic materials. Has pretty good drainage, but maybe not a lot of nutritional value for the plants. So if you start with topsoil, you want to amend it by adding some peat, vermiculite, or perlite, some compost, and some native soil. Native soil because it has existing beneficial bacteria in it that you want to introduce into that raised bed. So that mixture helps a lot. Vermiculite and perlite, if you've not used those improve drainage and water retention. You can buy perlite, I believe it is, at a swimming pool supply store in huge bags. It's not expensive. You can buy it at Lowe's and Home Depot and Walmart in little bitty bags and pay a lot more for it, or you can go to the swimming pool supply store or a garden center and buy it in larger bags, much cheaper. If you're doing uncontained beds, you can dig the soil from each side and pile it in and lower the surrounding soil, thereby raising the garden bed. But you still want to mix compost in it, and you would have to reshape them each year, clean it up each year. Any questions about compost? Do you all know what compost is? Anybody not know what compost is or have a source for it? You can buy compost. There's nothing wrong with purchased compost that you buy at your garden center or wherever you buy gardening supplies if you don't have a compost pile. If you have a compost pile, that's great. You make your own, it's fresh, you know what's in it. We have an example of a compost bin out in our demonstration gardens. They've made them out of pallets. I have a little one that's only that wide, the size of a barrel, and you turn it, and it's sufficient for my small yard. So compost provides nutrition. I talk a lot about nutrition. You have to feed your soil. And that doesn't matter whether it's in the garden, on the ground, or in a raised bed, or in a container. When your plants grow successfully the first year and they're weak the second year, it's because you probably didn't feed the soil back. They've taken all the nutrients out. And if you don't add fertilizer and compost and organic materials back into that soil gets weak.
So what do you put in your compost at home?
I put all my kitchen scraps except things like corn cobs and watermelon and cantaloupe rinds, just because they take too long to decompose. They can go in it fine. Leaves, dry grass clippings, Basically, in a compost pile, you want to have like 1/3 wet material and 2/3 dry material. Mix them up. And if I don't have enough dry material, if I'm out of dried leaves, I just shred up newspaper. It's cellulose. It dissolves, whatever the word is, rapidly. And the only thing about newspaper is don't use anything shiny. You can use colored ink. It's all soy-based. Just, leave the shiny sale papers out. And I just tear it into little strips. Thank you, mighty assistant. But I just keep a coffee can on my kitchen counter and throw stuff in there as I peel things, and then take them out to the compost bin, give it a turn, and it's good. We have a whole class on composting, but it's not difficult, and it shouldn't smell bad if you're doing it right. That's why you need more dry material than wet material. That keeps any odor down. If it stinks, you need to add dry material. So you want your soil to be 6 to 18 inches deep or higher. As you saw in some of those high raised beds for limited accessibility, they were probably 3 feet deep. Possibly it had something in the bottom, so it wasn't all soil, but you want to have enough soil for the roots. Now, my personal opinion, things like tomatoes have a deeper root system, so 6 inches isn't going to grow you tomatoes. You want at least 12 to 18 inches of soil for deep-rooted plants. If you're doing carrots or crops like potatoes, things that grow underground, you need more. But if you're just doing beans and radishes and even cucumbers aren't even that deep, the 6 to 8 inches is fine, but that 6 is the minimum. You're going to have to water it because we've talked about how great it drains. That's the plus. It's also the minus. So when you've had less than 2 inches of water a week from rain, you want to make sure you water it. When the soil is dry, 2 to 4 inches deep, you want to water it. When the temperature is 100 degrees out, like it's been this week, you may have to give a little more water. Droopy leaves and yellowing leaves are a sign of not enough water. It's also a sign of too much water. So you have to read your plants. My favorite garden tool for measuring if I need to use water is one of these. Just if it's dry up to the first or second knuckle, it needs to be watered. You can hand water, you can water with the bucket. A soaker hose is real nice if you have a way to hook it up. That way you're only watering at the plant. You can see here, you're watering at the plant, you don't have to water the whole bed. If you don't use a soaker hose, you want to make sure the whole bed gets good water. So, as we talked about, you can do more intensive gardening in a raised bed. This is the square foot method. On a wooden frame, they've measured off with string 12 by 12 foot squares. Each square gets a plant or a number of plants depending on what you're growing. By planting this intensively, you do have to make sure your soil is primed, that it's got adequate nutrients. But when you plant that close together, when the plants grow together, the leaves are going to start touching, shading out any weeds. You may have to watch for mildew, diseases like that, because the airflow may not be as adequate as you need it to be, but you will get higher yields out of that garden. It takes a little more, not work, but paying attention to what's going on out there. But you will get a look at that. They've got corn, cucumbers, looks like green peppers, tomatoes in there, all in a 4 foot by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 foot garden bed. You're not going to get a lot of corn, but you'll get enough for a couple meals. You're not going to be canning anything. But if you had several of those, you would be. So these are some examples of square foot gardening. It's in your handouts. In a square foot, you'd want 1 pepper, but you could do 4 onions, or you could do 6 beets. You'd want 1 head of cabbage. It's just because these plants have different space requirements, so you want to give them plenty of space. 1 kale plant, 4 lettuce plants, 4 eggs, 16 carrots, cucumbers down the road, pole beans down the road. Now tomatoes, like I said, tomatoes need a good amount of soil space for their root system. So they're doing 1 tomato for every 4 garden spaces. And they put some basil in there, that's a good companion plant for tomatoes. Some people say it improves the taste of tomatoes, but they grow well together. So you can look up on the internet square foot gardening. There's books on square foot gardening. A lot of information out there. So you've built your garden, you've grown your first season. Now what do you do to maintain it and use it every year? Well, every year you're going to need to feed your soil. Put more compost in. Maybe after you take out your fall cleanup, you take out all the spent plants, you might work some dried leaves into it and let them disintegrate over the winter, feed the soil again. Dried grass clippings. And we worry if the grass has been sprayed or not. Not so much in the fall, because anything that's sprayed on the grass is going to be gone by spring. But if you're, strictly organic and you want to watch those things, then use unsprayed, untreated grass. Little fertilizer, a general fertilizer, something like a 10-10-10 in the fall, that will replenish nutrients for the spring too. Be tough on plants that aren't doing well, even through the growing season. If you've got a plant out there that's starting to show signs of weakness, disease, or significant insect problems, yank it out and replace it with something. You don't have room to be tender-hearted. Get something in there that produces well. Weed it. When you see weed sprouts coming up, get them out while they're small. Don't let them go to seed, because then you will have a problem. If you do the square foot gardening method, you're going to know when it's not where you planted it real fast. So, and even otherwise, you'll know your plant's much better than a general garden. So get the weeds out while they're small. And when something's done, put something new in. And you can keep something going from very early in the spring if you do lettuces, radishes, the cool season crops. When they're done, it's time to plant your warm season crops, tomatoes, beans, peppers, cucumbers. And when they're done, it's time to put more cool season crops back in. So you can have something 8 months out of the year in your garden, or 9 if you use a cover. And some resources that are helpful to you. If you go to extension.tennessee.edu/publications, they don't make it easy. All of our gardening handouts are on that website. They're free to look at. Some of them, if you want to order, there may be a small charge, but like 99% of things are free. You can print them off at home. The one I'm suggesting for raised bed gardens is number SP291. Just type that in a little search field and it'll pop right up. Another good one, it's not specific to raised beds, but it's good for your overall garden vegetable knowledge, is PV901. And it's not University of Tennessee, but Alabama University has a real nice publication on raised bed gardens. And then a website that's good for the square foot garden information is mysquarefootgarden.net. So that's raised bed gardening's in a nutshell. Very good. Any questions or experiences that you've had with raised bed gardening? Okay.
I do have a question. In our area, when is a good time to start your second cool season vegetables?
Well, such as whatever. September, yeah. In the you will see that your tomatoes and your warm season vegetables are declining. They're not producing as much. The fruit's getting smaller, and that's usually going to be in September. And that's a good time to clean that bed out, fertilize it again, do whatever replenishing you feel is needed as far as composting or whatever, and start your cool season crops. And that way you'll have a nice flush of them before the first frost, which is usually October 15th.
I got a couple things. We recently bought a watering device on it. It's a timer, and we got it at Lowe's, and they work great. They just run on batteries, and you can program it to water as many times a day and as many minutes a day, and they're just, we can go on vacation and it just keeps on doing it, you know. And
They are great. It's like a mini landscape
yeah, so
watering system.
Yeah, and you can do the little, you can do it different ways, you know, what you hook to it and how you hook to it. Those are great.
Yeah, they're, now do they have a soil probe to determine if it's not
No,
rained or anything?
but it does have a setting on it that if it does rain, it won't come on.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
yeah.
But
So
it-
something like that, especially
For solar hoses and things like that, they're great.
Yeah,
And you go in, and it's real easy to just go back in there and reset it to whatever you want. If you want more minutes, you can just, you don't have to go through the whole thing, you can just do the minutes.
if you're going to be gone, check the forecast for the next week or so, and if it's going to be no rain, then you set a little more. If you're going to have rain, set a little less. But anything to make gardening easy is,
And it's only like $30, and it was just, I mean, it works great, you know.
and it just connects to your house hose outlet.
Yeah, you can just put it right on the spigot if you want to, you know.
Things like that are great.
And a friend, the guy I work for right now, he does raised bed gardening, and he went to like some of these tree companies and got them to come and dump big piles of chips out of their chippers because they just hunt a place to get rid of those. And he let them decompose for about 5 years and put them in these raised bed gardens. He mixed about like 1/4 soil and the rest of the chips, and they work great.
Yep, there's a lot of value.
After about 5 years, that what it turns out to be is really good for raised bed gardening.
Yeah, well, a lot of what you buy composted is composted tree shreddings.
And those tree companies, they'll just bring them and dump them if you'll ask them.
If you've got room to let them compost, that's great. If you have access to something like cow manure, chicken manure, well, cow manure is pretty good, but chicken manure, horse manure with the hay in it, you want to let that age as well because it's hot, it's high in nitrogen, and can burn your plant roots. But if you've got access to old hay from stables and that sort of thing, and it's starting to decompose, it's great organic material. Just think organic material.
Make sure they don't bring walnut chippings.
Well, black walnut does have a toxin in it
Gibberellum.
that will inhibit the growth of plants, if not kill them outright. And so you do want to watch black walnut, which is why sometimes some people don't like to get tree chippings because you don't know what's in it. But if you know, or if you've cut down a tree and you've got sawdust and tree parts left, it's great. That's why, you know, using old logs as a containment idea is good because it just feeds the soil back in. You wouldn't want to use a black walnut tree, I guess. I should have pointed that out.